Who were the wives of the giants of the Bible? The Nephilim. Get ready for a journey that will turn everything you think you know about one of the greatest mysteries of the Bible upside down. For centuries, humanity has been fascinated by an obscure passage in one of the world's oldest books, a passage that speaks of enigmatic beings, forbidden unions, and the birth of creatures that shaped Earth's destiny in ways you never imagined. Today, we're going to uncover the secret, delve into the layers of time, and challenge the most deeply rooted beliefs, revealing truths that perhaps have never been told to you. Forget everything you've heard and open your mind, because the story of the Nephilim and the women who united with them is far more profound and complex than any legend. But even before we dive into the fascinating legends and interpretations, allow me to drop a bombshell that might shock many of you. The Bible, in its clarity and precision, does not tell us that the Nephilim, these supposed giants, had wives or if they themselves multiplied through marital relations. Yes, you heard that right. The sacred text is meticulous in describing the origin of these beings. But, surprisingly, it remains silent about their marital life or their perpetuation. This is a great truth that most people are unaware of, and it is from this point that our exploration becomes even more intriguing. We are going to separate what the Bible truly says from popular beliefs, embarking on a journey that will make you question everything. The heavenly invasion. Imagine a time before the Great Flood, when the earth was young and humanity was beginning to spread. The Bible transports us to a scene almost out of a sci-fi movie, a moment many describe as a true heavenly invasion. Popular belief, and one of the oldest interpretations, tells us about beings from heaven, angels or sons of God, who observed the daughters of men here on earth. They were supposedly overcome by an overwhelming passion, abandoning their celestial positions, their spiritual nature, and descending to the physical world. This image is incredibly powerful. Beings of light, or perhaps from a different dimension, coveting human women. The idea of angels materializing, taking human form, and breaking divine barriers out of sheer desire is as shocking as it is intriguing. They would have indulged in earthly pleasures, defiling their spiritual essence and, moreover, introducing an unprecedented anomaly into the history of creation. It is a tale of rebellion, of a cosmic transgression that resonates through the millennia. The Bible, in the Book of Genesis, chapter 6, verses 1 and 2 states, "When people began to multiply on the face of the ground and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose." But pause for a moment and consider, is the biblical narrative truly that literal? Could the sacred text, in its depth and wisdom, not be pointing us towards something even more symbolic, yet equally devastating? The Bible always challenges us to look beyond the obvious, to seek the truth behind the curtain of legends. And that is exactly what we will do here. Prepare for your convictions to be questioned, not by a conspiracy theory, but by the very word that inspires this legend, the birth of giants. And what was born from these unions, whether celestial or earthly? The Bible introduces us to Nephilim, being shrouded in mystery and in most popular beliefs described as giants. The image that comes to mind is of colossal creatures, of imposing stature and superhuman strength, perhaps even with monstrous features, like the titans of ancient mythologies. They would be the direct result of an unnatural union, hybrids that defied the order of creation. Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, tells us, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown." Men of renown, or heroes of old, is an expression that, in Hebrew, can be translated as mighty men, men of fame. This already gives us an intriguing clue. Does giants refer only to physical height, to beings of 2, 3, or even 10 meters tall? Or does a giant here have a deeper meaning, speaking of a gigantism in power, in influence, in wickedness? Think about it. A giant might not just be large in body, but in their capacity to dominate, oppress, or be feared. A giant could be an imposing figure in society, a tyrannical leader, a ruthless warrior who subjugates others to their will. This perspective changes everything, doesn't it? Instead of flesh and blood monsters. Perhaps we're talking about giants in terms of power and corruption, figures who were so powerful and wicked that they stood out on earth. Now, And this is the great key to our understanding. The Bible is extremely specific about the origin of the Nephilim. They were the result of sexual relations between the sons of God and the daughters of men. The Bible describes who their parents were, who generated them. However, what the Bible does not tell us, explicitly and directly, is whether the Nephilim themselves had wives or whether they themselves fathered children. The biblical narrative focuses on the generation of the Nephilim from these initial unions, and not on their own reproductive capacity or the formation of families among them. Popular belief often assumes that because they were giants, they naturally multiplied, creating a race of giants. But the biblical text in its precision merely states that they were on the earth without detailing their own marital or reproductive life. This leads us to a fundamental question. If the Bible is so clear about their origin, why is it silent about their perpetuation? The answer might lie in the depth of what they truly represented and the uniqueness of their creation. The question arises, and here, dear listener, the question deepens and the veil of mystery begins to lift. If the Nephilim were these giants, born from the union of sons of God and daughters of men, then we urgently need to ask, who exactly were these sons of God? And who were these daughters of men? And, reinforcing what we had just discovered, does the Bible truly endorse the idea that the Nephilim themselves married and perpetuated a race of giants? Or is its focus merely on their origin as a unique and impactful event that culminated in divine judgment? The popular belief in fallen angels is fascinating and dramatic, and it is widely accepted. It suggests that the sons of God were angels who rebelled against God, abandoned their celestial abode, and materialized to have relations with human women. It is a powerful idea that points to a cosmic transgression. These daughters of men were then human women, seduced by the beauty and power of these celestial beings, defying divine order with their forbidden sexual relations. From this unnatural union, according to this interpretation, the Nephilim emerged, who, if this were the only source of giants, would not have been fathered by other women, but would be the final product of these transgressions. But the Bible, in its simplicity and purity, offers other perspectives that are equally powerful and, perhaps, even more impactful for our understanding of human and divine nature. Many scholars and theologians, throughout the centuries, have argued that the sons of God were not angels at all, but rather men. Yes, men, but not ordinary men. They were the descendants of the lineage of Seth, Adam and Eve's third son, born after Abel's murder. This lineage is often associated with those who began to call upon the name of the Lord. Genesis chapter 4, verse 26. In other words, they were men who sought God, who maintained faith, and the daughters of men. These would be the women from Cain's lineage, which was marked by rebellion, violence, and a life far from God. Think about it. The mixing would not be between the spiritual and the earthly, but between the pious and the impious, which is equally a grave violation from a divine perspective. In this interpretation, the heavenly invasion was not of angels, but an invasion of worldly values into the holy lineage. The men of Seth's lineage, seduced by the beauty of the women from Cain's lineage, compromised their faith and principles. This unnatural union would be the mixing of two lineages that should have remained separate in their spiritual purposes. This explains a corruption in a much more organic and human way, yet no less serious. The Nephilim, then, will be the children of these mixed marriages, who, instead of inheriting their parents' faith, develop into mighty men and tyrants, full of pride and violence. Which of these views seems more consistent with human nature and the biblical narrative of moral deviation? The answer lies in how you read between the lines and what you allow the Word to reveal. And most importantly, in both interpretations, the primary biblical focus is on the origin of the Nephilim from these original unions, and not on their subsequent reproduction. This changes the perspective on the longevity and continuity of a race of giants, forcing us to consider that perhaps the problem was not the perpetuation of their species, but their existence as an anomaly in itself. If you are as fascinated as I am by this revelation and want to continue unraveling the mysteries of the Bible, don't forget to hit the like button on this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future discoveries. Let's embark on this incredible journey together. Evidence of female giants. Now, a question that always arises when discussing the Nephilim is, what about their women? Were there female giants? Nephilim women? Popular belief, often influenced by other mythologies and legends, tends to create a universe where everything is symmetrical. If there are male giants, there must be female giants. But once again, the Bible invites us to carefully observe the details and the truth we have just demystified regarding the Nephilim's reproduction. The text of Genesis is very specific. It speaks of the sons of God, in the masculine plural, who united with the daughters of men, in the feminine plural. The result of this union, the Nephilim, is always presented in the masculine plural. The text does not mention the existence of Nephilim women as a distinct category or female offspring with special characteristics born from Nephilim with other women. The absence of any mention of their wives or direct descendants is a fundamental part of the biblical narrative. This leads us to believe that if there were female descendants from these original unions between the sons of God and the daughters of men, they would simply be the daughters of these parents, born with the same characteristics of stature or power, or perhaps not, just as not all children inherit the same characteristics from their parents. The biblical focus is on the origin of the Nephilim and the corruption that their actions, and possibly their imposing nature, brought to the earth. The Bible provides no evidence of a race or species of giant women who would be Nephilim women, in a sense distinct from male Nephilim. This is a crucial distinction. The story is not about a new species of females, but about the offspring resulting from specific unions. They would be daughters like any others, but born in a context of transgression and power. This demystifies the idea that the Bible describes a parallel population of superpowered or anomalous female beings. The emphasis is on the initial generation, not on perpetuation through a direct lineage of female giants. How the sons of God chose their wives. The criterion for selection is one of the clearest and, at the same time, most revealing points of this entire biblical narrative. The Bible leaves no room for doubt about what attracted the sons of God to the daughters of men. Genesis chapter 6, verse 2 states unequivocally, "The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose." The key word here is attractive. Physical beauty was a criterion, the trigger, the main motivation for these unions. It was not for political alliance, not for dowry, not for wisdom or piety. It was for visual attraction, for desire. The Bible is direct in pointing to sensuality and carnal desire as the driving force behind these choices. This leads us to a profound reflection. If the sons of God were fallen angels, as many believe, their fall was motivated by lust and a desire for carnal pleasures, abandoning their celestial posts for fleeting and forbidden satisfaction. If they were pious men from Seth's lineage, their fall was a betrayal of their spiritual principles, abandoning the pursuit of God in exchange for earthly beauty and the immediate gratification of their eyes. In both cases, external beauty became a trap, an instrument of deviation and corruption. But the most painful question is, did they want them to, or were they forced? The Bible says they took as their wives, a phrase that can be interpreted in various ways. In ancient society, taking a woman could mean an arranged marriage, an irresistible seduction, or, in darker cases, coercion or even abduction. There is no mention of explicit female consent in the text. The absence of their voice in the narrative is eloquent in itself. Whatever the interpretation of the sons of God, the act of taking as their wives and the motivation of beauty highlight the carnal and selfish nature of this union. It was a matter of satisfying a powerful desire without considering the spiritual or moral consequences. The innocence of the daughters of men, or their own sinfulness, made them targets of an overwhelming desire, which culminated in the birth of a generation of giants, not only in stature, but in arrogance and depravity. It is a vivid reminder of how uncontrolled desire can lead to catastrophic consequences, the corruption of bloodlines. The true horror of this story is not merely in the existence of giants or in the union between beings of different natures, but in what this union represented for the corruption of bloodlines and, consequently, for the morality of the entire earth. Genesis chapter 6, verse 5, describes a scenario with terrifying clarity. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Do you understand the gravity? It wasn't just an isolated sin. These unions, whether of angels with women or pious men with impious women, triggered a cascade of corruption that spread like a plague. The line separating the righteous from the wicked, the spiritual from the carnal, was blurred. Morality disintegrated to an irreparable point. If the sons of God were fallen angels, their hybrid offspring was an aberration, a direct violation of divine order, bringing a demonic and distorted influence to earth. This offspring, the Nephilim, would be a physical manifestation of this rebellion, acting as catalyst for moral degradation. If they were pious men from Seth's lineage, their union with the impious daughters of men resulted in the loss of their lineage's spiritual purity, leading their descendants to become mighty men, but in wickedness, not in divine righteousness. What should have been a line of faith became a line of corruption. In both cases, the result was an earth where violence, oppression, and depravity dominated. The essence of sin, which is separation from God, became the norm. Humanity, or a large part of it, plunged so deeply into darkness that the Creator himself regretted that it made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. Genesis chapter 6, verse 6. This is the true tragedy of the corruption of bloodlines, the loss of innocence, the distortion of creation, and the prevalence of wickedness that knew no bounds, culminating in a cry for justice that reached the heavens. The violence in giant households. Now imagine the atmosphere within the households of these giants, these men of renown or mighty men. The Bible gives us a grim picture of that time, stating that the earth was filled with violence, Genesis chapter 6, verse 11. If these men were tyrannical leaders, ruthless warriors, and oppressors, what would life be like under their roofs? The cruelty and brutality they exercised in the outside world would certainly not be absent in their own homes. It wasn't just society in general that was corrupted. This corruption infiltrated the most basic structures. Families. If the Nephilim were children of ambition and carnal desire, raised in a world without moral laws, it's easy to imagine that their homes were not places of peace and love, but rather centers of power where domination was the rule. On the contrary, they would be environments of domination, abuse of power, perhaps constant fear and forced submission. The lack of a moral compass and the prevalence of selfishness transformed these households into small kingdoms of tyranny. Violence was the dominant language of that era. These giants would not hesitate to use their strength and influence to get whatever they wanted, whether from other men or from the women in their lives. Oppression and tyranny would extend from the public to the private sphere, where women, in particular, would be in a position of extreme vulnerability, voiceless, rightless, mere objects of desire or procreation. If there is no biblical evidence that the Nephilim married, imagine the position of these women living under the yoke of mighty men. The home, which should have been a refuge, became a stage for the display of force and domination. This was a reality that broke the Creator's heart. It was not just the existence of giants, but the moral quality and the violence that permeated every aspect of life, including family life, that determined divine judgment. The seed of violence and selfishness planted in the original unions blossomed into a world where human life had little value and power was the only deity. Judgment falls. The Bible is clear. Wickedness on earth had reached a point of no return. The corruption of bloodlines, widespread violence, and moral depravity had perverted creation to such an extent that there was no longer any hope of redemption. And then God's judgment fell upon the earth. The flood was not an act of blind wrath, but a painful necessity. It was a radical cleansing, a way to wipe the slate clean so that humanity could have a new beginning, preserving the figure of Noah and his family. The magnitude of the destruction reflects the depth of the corruption that preceded it, a drastic measure for a wickedness that had become systemic. But here lies a forgotten truth. The flood was not just to punish the giants or their parents, but to cleanse the earth of all the wickedness that had spread. The Nephilim, or the men of renown and mighty men, were a symptom of this disease, not the sole cause. The cause was a moral degeneration of humanity, which allowed these unions and the consequent violence to flourish unchecked, leading to an unrecognizable world. Therefore, the flood was not just a physical event, but a spiritual event, an eradication of evil that had taken root so deeply that it threatened to destroy the very image of God in man. It was an act of love and justice, a painful surgery to save what remained of hope for humanity. It is a severe lesson about the consequences of ignoring the voice of conscience and divine standards, an unequivocal demonstration that there are limits to divine patience in the face of perversity. Post-flood female giants? Now, we come to one of the most intriguing and challenging parts of our exploration. If the flood cleansed the earth of all corruption in the Nephilim, how does the Bible mention them again after the flood? And would this bring back the question of female giants, or women who are related to these new giants? Remember that, according to the biblical text, we do not know if the original Nephilim reproduced themselves. Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, states that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. And hundreds of years after the flood, when Moses sent spies into Canaan, they returned with a frightening report. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. Numbers chapter 13, verse 33. Does this mean that the same hybrid beings survived the flood? Most biblical interpretations, which hold that God eradicated all life on the earth except those on the ark, reject this idea. So, how can we explain this reappearance of such formidable beings? This is where the interpretation that the sons of God were men from Seth's lineage and Nephilim were mighty men of great stature or tyrants gains even more strength. If Nephilim is a term for men of great stature, strength, or tyrannical power, then it is entirely possible that, after the flood, new generations of men with these characteristics arose naturally, without the need for supernatural intervention or unnatural unions. Noah's lineage was preserved, but sin and the inclination towards evil persisted in humanity. Thus, the expression Nephilim post-flood could refer to men of great physical stature, exceptionally tall people, such as the descendants of Anak, the Emim, the Zamzummim, who are mentioned in the Bible as gigantic peoples. This would not imply a supernatural origin, only a physical characteristic that could be genetically inherited. These would be families where gigantism was a common trait, and the women who married them would be human women, men of great power and tyranny. Like the original meaning of Nephilim as fallen ones, tyrants, or those who cause others to fall. Human nature, after flood, continued to have capacity to produce oppressive and violent leaders whose gigantic, evil actions made them notorious. The idea of female giants post-flood would, therefore, be the same. Women who belong to these groups of tall peoples or families of tyrants. The Bible does not point to a second heavenly invasion or new unions between angels and women after flood. The reappearance of the Nephilim is more likely a resurgence of certain characteristics or patterns of behavior, reminding humanity of its constant struggle against evil and the temptation of power. It is not about a new race emerging, but a resurgence of condition where human women would continue to marry men, some of whom could be called Nephilim because of their characteristics. The forgotten truth. As we unravel these layers of interpretation and popular belief, we arrive at a forgotten truth that is more important than the exact identification of the sons of God or the precise stature of the Nephilim. The essence of Genesis chapter 6, regardless of whether angels or humans were the fathers of the giants, and regardless of the Bible not stating whether the Nephilim themselves had wives, is a solemn warning about the corruption of the human soul and the consequences of straying from divine standards. The true lesson the Bible wants to convey to us is that the mixing of the sacred with the profane, the unbridled pursuit of carnal pleasures, the ambition for power, the prevalence of violence, and the distortion of moral values lead to ruin. The flood was not just a historical event, but an eternal reminder that God does not tolerate continuous wickedness and the total corruption of the human heart, nor does he allow his creation to be indefinitely perverted. The forgotten truth is that the mystery of the Nephilim serves as a mirror for our own condition. How many times have we, in our pursuit of beauty, power, or pleasure, taken for ourselves what we shouldn't, mixing what is pure with what is impure in our lives? How many times does the beauty of the world blind us to the spiritual consequences of our choices? It's not about seeking the extraordinary, but about understanding the ordinary within ourselves. It does not matter whether the sons of God were angels or men. What matters is the transgression and the devastating outcome. The focus of the narrative is the moral condition of humanity, which culminated in the flood. This is the truth we need to reclaim and understand, that straying from divine principles leads to self-destruction and the need for intervention. The final warning. And this forgotten truth leads us directly to the final warning for the times we live in. Jesus Christ himself drew a direct parallel between the days before the flood and the days preceding his return. In Luke chapter 17, verses 26 and 27, he says, "Just as it was in the days of Noah, so too will it be in the days of the Son of Man. People were eating, drinking, marrying, and being given in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark. Then the flood came and destroyed them all." He did not focus on giants or fallen angels, but on the moral condition of humanity. People were absorbed in their daily lives, in pleasures and material concerns, and completely oblivious to the impending calamity. Wickedness, violence, and indifference to God were the norm. The story of the Nephilim and the pre-flood corruption is, therefore, a powerful mirror for our own times. We may not see literal giants walking around, but do we not see giants of power and influence, tyrants who oppress corrupt leaders, and a society increasingly immersed in violence, materialism, and selfishness? The mixing of the holy with the profane, the pursuit of fleeting pleasures, the glorification of external beauty at the expense of inner purity. All of this resonates with the narrative of Genesis 6. The final warning is that history repeats itself, not always identically, but in its patterns of moral deviation and its consequences. If we do not learn the lessons of the past, we will be condemned to relive the same judgments. This is a call for deep reflection, to look within ourselves and at the society around us, and to question whether we are repeating the errors that led to the destruction of an entire era. The Word of God, in its timelessness, warns us today, just as it warned Noah. If you have been moved and challenged by this narrative, please show your support by leaving a like and sharing this video with your friends and family. And of course, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of discoveries and truths that will make you think. Thank you for watching. We hope this journey through the mysteries of the Nephilim and the women who shaped their story has been as revealing for you as it was for us in preparing it. May this discussion about angels, men, giants, and the corruption of bloodlines inspire you to seek the deepest truths of God's Word and to reflect on the importance of your own choices and the condition of the world around you. Remember, the Bible is not just a book of ancient stories. It is a living guide, full of lessons of present and warnings for future. May the forgotten truth about Genesis 6 serve as a powerful reminder of divine justice and the love that always offers a chance for redemption, even in the darkest times. Stay tuned for more content that will expand your mind and enrich your faith. Until next time,